just to introduce myself, my name is Liam Herrick. I'm the Director of the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, and we're delighted to the opportunity to take part in this event today at the invitation of Frontline Defenders. Maybe just to say a little bit about our organisation first. Many of you will be very familiar, but we're a nationally focused independent human rights organisation based in Dublin. We have been in existence for 41 years, and we campaign across a broad range of issues relating to justice, equality and human rights. The area of privacy and information rights has been a concern and focus of ours way back since the 1980s. ICCL and our colleagues in Liberty in the UK were involved in legal challenges against the British government's surveillance of telecommunications between Ireland and Britain, and we've had an interest in the issue ever since. But in the last number of years, we've become a member of the International Network of Civil Liberties Organisations, which has also prioritised this area of work. There's 13 member organisations, including the ACLU and Liberty, who you'll be familiar with, and also other partners in South America, in Africa and in Asia. In the last year, the international network has decided to make the ICCL really the focal point of its work on information and privacy rights. And just in the last month, Elizabeth, who will be speaking later today, Elizabeth Farries, has taken up the role of Information Rights Project Manager with the International Network of Civil Liberties Organisations based in ICCL in Dublin. So she'll be speaking about that work. I suppose just to say that the Human Rights Defenders platform, which I had the pleasure of attending during the week, is an incredibly inspirational event in terms of hearing the experiences of people that are on the sharp end of human rights work in some of the most difficult and challenging regions of the world. And you'll hear from Wojtek and Pablo how digital security is one of the great challenges that they face. But from a civil liberties organisation perspective, working in a stable country such as Ireland, and indeed the United States, Canada and the UK, these concerns are very alive to us too. They play out in different ways, the effects and consequences can be different, but they are the same issues, because surveillance and the interference by government with the democratic activities of journalists, trade unions, human rights activists and civil liberties workers is a global threat. And of course, the threat specifically posed by information sharing means the vulnerabilities in our digital security here can have a detrimental effect on our colleagues that are working in other regions of the world. So I suppose that's the global context of why this is such an important issue for us, in the same way that it's an important issue for Frontline Defenders. We're going to have three contributors, and then we're hopefully going to have time to open this up to discussion. The first two speakers, I believe, are going to share their time with each other. Wojtek Bogus and Pablo Zavala both work in the digital protection sphere for Frontline Defenders. Wojtek is the Digital Protection Coordinator with Frontline Defenders for 12 years now, and is also a digital protection trainer. He's originally from Poland and is a physicist, and he's been working in human rights defender protection for across all regions of the world over many years. Pablo Zavala is originally from Guatemala, is a computer scientist. He's been working as a digital protection consultant with Frontline for 5 years, but for over 20 years, working with digital protection issues exclusively with human rights defenders in the Latin American region. So I'm going to hand over now to Wojtek and to Pablo.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. Maybe you show the slide. So, welcome. Thank you very much, Liam. Thank you for introducing. Maybe I should say, I don't know if I should say just maybe 2 sentences about Frontline Defenders, just to for those people who do not know us. So we are an organization based here in Ireland, but we work with human rights defenders, people who defend or protect human rights for others in peaceful way around the world. We help and try to protect those people, those brave and incredibly beautiful people. And just last week we had a meeting of over 100 of them coming to Dublin from all around the world. I think it was over 90 countries represented, or around 90 countries, so a lot of different issues, a lot of different cultures, and a lot of different habits and contexts. So we work to protect those people, to try to protect those people, help them as they are needing this, with grants and with advocacy, with campaigning, and many different aspects. One of the aspects is related to digital protection and digital security. So this panel is related to surveillance, and we thought that we're going to concentrate on the question, so how to outsmart online surveillance, and we've been thinking, what would it mean for you, for each one of us actually, and then we will be giving examples of human rights defenders that we know, but it's an issue for each one of us actually, living in those days where we mostly have presence, or even bigger presence, in online communities than in local communities or physical communities. It's shifting towards this, at least for many of the people. So we've been thinking what kind of questions we could ask. So one question is related to what does it mean that we are surveilled, right? So how are we surveilled, right? So where are we surveilled? And then who is surveilling us, and why are they surveilling us? And then coming back to the title of this panel, how can we outsmart this surveillance? So basically, that's a little bit of the plan that we have together with Pablo. Before we flip the slide to the next page and show you what we were thinking about those spaces where we are surveilled, I just want to ask you, where do you think we are being surveilled digitally, online? Where do you think this surveillance is happening? Sort of like, where are you surveilled, you think?
Social media.
Social media, yes.
Great.
What else?
Our searches.
Okay, so browsing and searches, yeah? Everywhere. Okay, this covers everything. Thank you very much.
Very positive
This is it.
attitude towards surveillance. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. But let's be a little bit more specific, maybe.
Blacklists.
Which one?
Blacklists of trade unions and activists.
This is the email list you said, or
Blacklists.
blacklists?
Yeah, when some people are blacklisted and so they can't find a job or can't open a bank account or things like that, no? Yeah, that's sort of a product or a conclusion of the surveillance. They survey the people and decide, okay, I don't like this one because he's an opposition, and then they blacklist him, no? Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm sure all of you have a certain device with you, and it sits in your pocket probably, or in your bag, and it's probably surveilling you at this moment in some certain way that we will talk about. What is this device? Mobile phone. Yes, exactly. So we are very much surveilled through this beautiful device that is very useful, but then again, a very dangerous device. Where else? Anyone? Okay, let's maybe flip the slide and let's see. So yes, we came up also with very similar lists, like social media. That's definitely one, and then web browsing that searches, and the other activities that we do through the web browser, and then phones, tracking, bidding, apps, and we talk about this in a moment. And then the last one that we thought that it would be interesting and to mention is hacking. So sort of using devices or abusing those devices in a way that we are not expecting, and by people who we do not know and do not expect that they are actually doing it. So what we want to do is we want to dive into each one of those elements and ask ourselves a little bit the question of, okay, so how are we being surveilled? So what is the way, what is the problem behind those? So we've been thinking that, for example, taking the social networking, that one of the things that we hear from human rights defenders a lot is this necessity of putting your own name there. So some of the social media, for example, Facebook, is forcing you to put your real name. So there is this real name policy. And you may say, okay, this is fantastic, because if someone is abusing me, then it's going to be a way, an opening for protecting me, for finding the person and maybe stopping the abuse. But then in the same way, if there's And if I'm the LGBT activist, or if I'm the minority, this minority or that minority, and I want to express my views, then maybe I'm going to be targeted because of this, right? So that's one of the element. And then if you think about the information, that all of this information that you leave behind, so I don't know if you ever search or did you ever look at your own profile on social media, right? What other people can see about yourself? So that's sort of interesting thing to do. Should we play the video? Let's play the video. Let's see. So there is this little video that we wanted to. I don't know if we're going to have sound. If we're not going to have sound, then I'm going to be singing. And you may.
Sorry. You know, technology never works when
You
you
can
want
clearly
it to.
see we didn't try it before. Let's try again.
Yeah.
Let's start again.
Okay. Sorry.
One more time. Everyone is woken up now, no?
Oui, oui, bien. Bien, c'est une ding. Julie. Ja, goeie liefdesleven. 3, 4.
Zo bevreden, daar zijn meestal open, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Is het close? Maison rouge, balcon, blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekening nog met? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Het wel, ik denk dat ik het wel weet.
Yes, no.
7. Last month, we spent €200 on alcohol. €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8. 5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €750.000. Ja, eigenlijk. 41.
Ja.
De rest?
Ja, zelf. Oh man. That's cute. Eng.
So we stop in a moment and then we switch to the slides. I want to. Yeah. Okay. You motivated now maybe to search for yourself. So this is, you see on the screen that this is a bank advertisement actually. So you may ask yourself a question, why did banks spend money on, on such a cool video, right? So it's not, you may think that this is not exactly transferring this is not a profit for the bank, but actually it is, because to have those information is dangerous basically, because someone can impersonate you and someone can open an account or take a credit from the bank or do many different things. So this is relevant for each one of us. Obviously for human rights defenders, this is relevant even more because their life depends on the information like this. So if you are being forced by a company to reveal your own real name, then there may be a problem. And there are cases of activists, for example, LGBTI activists from Uganda being targeted and some of them being killed actually because of the fact of giving the name in the social networking. So that's one of the things. Then obviously there is an online harassment and following the people's life out of the social networking and impersonation, and maybe most importantly as well for the human rights defenders, knowing the networks. So basically, we have this situation right now where we have commercial companies monopolizing our public space. So it would be an equivalent of us sitting in a, I don't know, a shop, right? And instead of being in a part of university, which has no commercial incentives, we would be sitting in a shop, which would be recording us. And so that's more or less a space that we have right now for our social networking and so for our social life. And it's really scary. It's really strange and scary that we have it like this. And there are ways of outsmarting it, but we'll come to this in a moment, actually. Do you want to? You can always add, you know.
Okay. He likes to monopolize the...
Yeah. No.
But I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I'll take the next one. I'll take web browsing.
So basically, the networks of contacts, so having people also revealing who they work with, who they are close with. That's how you can imagine that if you have social networking being done in these commercial spaces, then there is incentive for them to record this information, to draw the social graph, as people say, so understand what are the relationship with people. And then they may have, those companies may have incentive to sell this information to this government or that government, and you may be interested to read in the news about Facebook being more open in this place or restrictive in that place, in restricting this keywords or that keywords in countries in the world. So, or other companies. It's not only Facebook, it's also Microsoft. But it's really interesting to see that we have those big companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and a couple of others. Like, it's really a handful of companies that are providing us with the choice of our public space at the moment. And yes, so I'll pass it on to you, since you promised.
So the other thing we thought of was web browsing traces. So every time we open up our browser, whether it be Firefox or Chrome or any other, we're visiting different sites on the internet, and a lot of information is being gathered while we're visiting the sites. You were mentioning that whenever we are searching something from Google, actually then ads come up regarding our searches and things like that. So they're actually profiling us and gathering information and tracking us whenever we are asking information and searching for information and using the browser. So the technology basically used to do this is something called cookies. I don't know if you heard about cookies, but basically it's a little very, very small, tiny file that every website we visit has the ability to save in our computers. So the next time we visit the same site, it actually knows that we had visited that site beforehand. And so in that way, they can actually track us from one website to another website to another website. And then whenever we open our Gmail or our Facebook, all of this information is then stored on our own profile in Facebook or in Gmail or those systems where we also use a lot of tools like Maps or YouTube or things like that. And all of this information is put together, and they have a big, big profile of who I am, what am I doing, and whom I visited, etc., etc. Mainly they do it to throw us specific ads, ads that might be interesting for me or for the people that's browsing. But it's a lot of information, and they're actually starting to something called mining that information, going with mathematics and statistics and going through that information and starting to predict what my behavior will be in a few months or maybe in a few years. Facebook was saying that they can even predict that I'm going to get a divorce in 2 years. And I actually don't know that I'm going to do it. But somehow my profile changed in a way where they can say, oh, you have 85% of chances of getting a divorce, or things like that. So it's very, very scary how they're actually tracking us and what they're using with that tracking. Another way they track us is actually because the internet, as we use it normally in the browser, it knows where we are, which country we are. in sometimes which hotel we are in. And this is due to something called the IP address. I don't know if you heard about it, but whenever we go to Facebook, it says, oh, you're now in Dublin. I thought you were in Cork or something. And now you're here. And it's sort of, how does it know that I'm in Dublin and not in Cork if everything is just the same, but the difference is that my phone is maybe connecting to the internet through a satellite, an antenna that's actually in Dublin and not an antenna that's in Cork. So by sort of design or by the way it works, it actually is tracking us, no? And the other big problem with web browsing is, again, the companies. The companies are like hovers, gathering all of information from wherever they can and doing profiles. One of the mottos of Google is they want all your information, know everything. They want to know everything about you, know. And so it is very hard to come up with solutions that will actually permit you to still use the internet, still find the information you want, still look at the maps that you want to look at and navigate without actually giving out your information and who you are and having your private information be private.
So next thing we wanted to mention is phones, right? So that's this device that you have in your pocket, and it is tracking you by design, basically. So you all know that someone is interfering with our presentation. So it's sort of designed to be tracking us because the company has to deliver the call. Someone is calling you, and the company needs to know where you are. So basically, whenever you're using the phone, you are being tracked. And if you want to show another video, that we prepared you a little presentation that is visualizing what the tracking is. So this person, the MP from Germany, Mattel Spitz, he went to ask his mobile company to give him a data that they have on him for the last half a year. And Freedom of Information Act gave him this ability to get this information. And he designed a map, and you can see it online, just to see what they have about him. And this is the map where you see one phone, maybe a little bit lower, five.
Sorry?
So one phone is being on the map, but you can imagine that you would see a lot of phones here. So the mobile phone company has ability to see those patterns. So for example, one of the patterns that for the dictatorship or the place where the people are being monitored in much more strict way is the pattern where the phones are coming together and then, for example, they disappear from the map. So that could mean that there is a secret meeting, or there is a meeting of people who know that they should switch off their phones when they meet. So there are different patterns that they actually can monitor on their data. So because they see where you are. It's not about the GPS or those things that are even more precise in tracking you. It's about the fact that you have a phone on. Or the cases of, let's say, protests in various countries, say in Belarus, people would go to the protest, and after the protest they would receive an SMS from the company instructed by the government to SMS them that we know that you've been at this protest because their phone was there. Perhaps they were not on the protest, they were just there because they were passing by. But this is the ability of tracking us through the fact that the phone is being tracked by design. There's various elements of problems with the mobile phones, and again, we're not going to go into details of this because it's a very limited time for the panel. But one thing just to mention that you have various apps on the phone. So all of those apps, they have access to your information, and you may hear from time to time that there is this app that has been discovered that it's actually taking the information off your phone. So the phone is like a mine of your private secret information. So it's really interesting place, and very often people would undermine the value of the phone. It's such a device that you can lose very, very quickly and very easily. So it's really important to, again, for the human rights defenders to think exactly what do they have on the phone and how to dispose the information, how do they manage the phone in order to protect their identity, but also to protect the information that they carry with them. Back to you.
Thank you, Wojtek. So the next one we thought about was the phone itself and computers, but as they were hacked. So there's more of an intent of hacking. There's somebody or some program on the other side. Normally, hacking is done for the broader audience. So they do a virus or program a virus and then try to get as many people infected with the virus for different things. Concretely, when we're talking about surveillance, it would be to gather information or to surveil the people that have the virus or the malware. So the first way to get infected is actually a lot of people get infected through their browser. When they're browsing the internet, maybe there's a design problem in the browser that hasn't been attended or sometimes isn't even known by the company that makes the browser or the organization that makes the browser. And so they take advantage of that problem in the programming and then make a virus that will actually infect you if you visit a certain site. No? So once the site is prepared, they can do several things to try to lure you into watching that site or clicking that link in order for you to go there. So the way they do it is sometimes doing it by something called phishing. I don't know if you heard the term, but basically it means that they send you an email that looks very attractive and that you want to click on the link, whether it be a discount on Amazon or maybe a beautiful girl that wants to have a date with you or something, or that you want $1,000 or something, no, or $1 million, and so you would want to click on that, and then that's how you get infected, no. So another way they infect your phone would be sending SMS messages that actually have a link and they're also tempting. Maybe it's scandalous news that you think, oh, this is really, really important for me to see, and you click on it, and it actually takes you to a site that infects you, and then to another site that is a false news or something. And so you're not even aware that you have this new program on your phone or on your computer. And many of those viruses or malwares are actually tracking you in different ways, no? Or are turning on your camera or turning on your mic in your phone or in your computer, and they can surveil you through that, no? We have known of different human rights defenders and that have specifically been targeted with viruses that are not made for the broader audience, but that are basically made for companies that sell those viruses to governments. They actually sell them in these different, how do you call it, when they sell arms and different like tanks and conferences where they promote all this, trade shows and fairs, and they have a booth during this trade fairs with arms and tanks and helicopters, and they have a booth saying, oh, do you want to spy on somebody? We can sell you a virus. And there are many companies that do this, like 150 companies around the world, and they're selling viruses to governments so that the governments can do, well, supposedly combat terrorism and go organized crime and things like that, cartels, but they are actually being used to attack human rights defenders and surveil human rights defenders. Yes.
So, you could, just for the record, not all the surveillance is bad, right? So you may think that, oh, we are doomed and all of the monitoring is bad. Like surveillance can be used in a way that is actually good for the society. Of course, it's a matter of the motivation, of volition of the person or the organization that is undertaking the surveillance. So there are things that you may, use surveillance for and are actually beneficial, so transportation and health, etc., etc. So there's lots of elements that are okay, that are desired. But of course, in our work with human rights defenders, we come to attend the outcomes of the surveillance that it's actually really detrimental, and that's why we are profiled in this way. So you need to understand and excuse us for this. And so that's really, in brief, what surveillance may be. I just wanted us to flip to mitigations for a moment. And so, but first of all, you can hear from what we are saying that those are commercial companies that are surveilling us, governments and criminal groups. And there are lots of people who are interested in our information, in our lives, and we, not without even us knowing about it. So let's, it's the same slide with a different caption on the top, basically. So we're just gonna be using this list to think for a moment, how are you able to mitigate this? So the first one, social networking, is really a tricky one, because it's not within our hands to control who has our information. Once we put it there, it's not ours. It can be used in many different ways. It can be used in the surprising ways, because your photographs can be used in the commercial companies, commercial advertisements, without you even knowing about it, because that's how it is, the contract between you and Facebook, for example. So obviously, it's a question, what would you put out there? What is not to be placed there? And it's a question how much of yourself you're willing to put online. And again, maybe for you it's all right to put everything. It's your choice. It's like in the video that you have been seeing, we probably haven't seen many people who went and this guy was sort of luring into a funny situation because they were not interesting. Their life was well protected because they decided not to put much online. There are various ways to set up your account in Facebook, in Twitter. There are various ways to set up the account so it's much more protected. There is something that you may have seen in the settings, which is called two-factor authentication, which means that you not only give the password, but you also give a code that comes to your mobile, the code that is generated by your mobile, so you don't even have to be connected, or the code that is sort of stored in a special device, like a USB device or some other device. So there are ways of protecting your space, but ultimately, once you put it out there, it's in the hands of the company that is managing this information, so Facebook, Twitter, Google, Microsoft, and all of those. So social media is really, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yes, but still there are things we can do with social media. One thing we've seen increasingly is that the harassment or the trolling, specifically in what we work in as human rights defenders, there's a lot of bashing of LGBT people or women who are working for their rights in very conservative countries. And what they do is that normally they get a lot of people to start doing bad comments on their Facebook accounts. So many that the information that was there, or the voice that they want to give out, the women human rights defenders, is not heard anymore because of these other things that are coming into their comment area. So there's where we can help them out in order to block certain countries or certain situations for those comments not to be so harassed. The fan page be not so harassed and mitigate those types of attacks, or sometimes they cancel some YouTube channel by saying that it has bad content, or they're using bad words, or something that in the policy of YouTube is not allowed, which is false. It's a lie. But if you get enough people saying that, YouTube will take down your channel without asking. So we help them to bring it back to life and continue their work. So there are ways where we can help human rights defenders in dealing with problems inside social media. No?
Yeah, so it's not really outsmarting, right? It's mitigating the outcome of the surveillance, which is great. It's what we want to do as well.
Yes.
So coming down on the list, the web browsing traces. So perhaps you may have heard about the VPN and proxy, and maybe some of you even heard about the Tor and Tor browser. So those are different techniques, the VPN, proxy, and Tor browser, of protecting your identity, right? So Pablo was speaking before that your identity is known to a server, to Google, Facebook, to maybe even other people, because if you leave traces of your information, that they are marked with your identity, your address, where you are. So you can use those tools, and we offer those tools to human rights defenders to be used in countries where their life depends on the fact that they are being anonymous, to protect your identity and to mitigate, to minimize the traces you leave behind. Briefly adding to this? No, we go on.
No, yeah, we can go on.
So the next one is phone tracking, and again, this is a tricky one, because once you switch the phone on, you are in the hands of your mobile phone company. And sometimes even, we've been organizing trainings of human rights defenders from a country in some other country, and we took part of the group this route and part of the other group this route, just to obscure the fact that they are meeting actually. And then we forgot to tell them that once they actually get to the country of destination, they should not switch their phones on. And all of them switch the phone on, and the phones checked back in the country that they started with, and sort of reporting, hello, I arrived, So suddenly there was a whole group of human rights defenders that arrived more or less in the same moment in a country, far away from their home country, and the phones just popped up on the map, as you have seen on the screen. So once you switch the phone on, there is a problem. Of course, you can buy another SIM, right? And in some countries, fewer and fewer, you can buy SIM that is not related to you as your identity, as your ID. There's fewer and fewer of those countries where you can buy anonymous SIM, let's say. You can go on the black market in some countries and buy a SIM. But then it's going to take a limited time when you're going to be walking the same paths, right? So you're going to go home, you're going to go to work, you're going to go to the office, and mobile phone company will be able to basically pinpoint, oh, this is you with different SIM card. So it's a tricky one. Of course, it's good to protect your phone. It's good to, there's lots of elements of this, like not installing the apps that you don't know, and all of those common sense, digital common sense, let's say, that we still don't have developed that much.
I can get the last one
yes,
if you want. Okay. And so last we were talking about hacking your phone or your computer. There's a lot of things we can do regarding having your antivirus up to date. But mainly it has to do with practices. Whenever somebody comes to us and say, how can I stop my computer or my phone being hacked? We tell them the best way is to revise your behavior. How do you work? How do you click on everything? Do you download every attachment? Do you open it? What's the procedure you do when you work? Because there is where you can minimize a lot of the possibility of infection in your computers and your phones. And then there are a lot of organizations, not a lot of, but some organizations that are working on specific tools to identify these viruses that are being bought by governments and that normal antiviruses will not find and will not detect. No? So there are some tricks we can do to find out if a computer has been or a phone has been hacked by a government or organized group. So in general, this is what the advice we give. And so if we mitigate the possibility of getting infected, then the mitigation of surveillance would be there as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, well, I think that's been hugely informative, I think, at the level that we're all at in terms of our phones and the interface with the risks that we're talking about from the individual perspective. Elizabeth maybe might bring this back up to the level of the state. Elizabeth Faries is the Information Rights Project Manager with ICCL and the International Network of Civil Liberties Organisations. She's originally from Canada, has practiced as a lawyer there, and has a master's from the University of Toronto, where the Snowden digital surveillance files, the archive, is retained. She's going to speak about the work of the International Network of Civil Liberties Organisations, which has been very much inspired by the Snowden disclosures, and particularly our colleagues in the ACLU have been central in some of that work in recent years.
Thanks, Liam. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Wojtek and Pablo have described serious problems regarding each of our digital privacy rights. These aren't new challenges for us. They've talked about viruses, about hacking, and about government spying. And I want to be absolutely clear, our governments are spying on us. They read our emails, they listen to our conversations, they see where we're going, and they look at the websites we browse. And so while these digital advancements that we've made over the past decades, from the dial-up internet to our current smartphones, these have been impressive and positive in a lot of ways, but they've also opened these new windows into our lives and these opportunities for governments to look at us in a way they never have before. These windows are proving harmful to the concepts of democracy. They weaken democratic processes in countries where we often take them for granted, and they impede the development of democratic policies and institutions in countries struggling under more authoritarian and more abusive regimes. So we'll look at some of these international examples from countries where INCLO member civil rights societies exist today. There was earlier today a workshop about the global fight for LGBT rights. That fight is ongoing in Egypt, where members of the LGBT community are living in fear following a very recent wave of arrests and violence. Rights groups say that dozens of people have been detained after rainbow flags were waved innocuously outside a conference or a concert in Cairo last month. And this current spike of arrests is part of this ongoing climate of oppression against LGBT people. They've long grappled in Egypt with government repression, including online surveillance. So Rami Rayouf, who we'd hoped could be here but wasn't able to be, is a privacy and data protection expert who works for an INCLO member, the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights. So Rami says when confronted with these privacy encroachments such as surveillance, the Egyptian government often justifies it by saying, well, it's only used against the bad guys. And I mean, clearly one's sexual orientation or their gender identity is not a legitimate marker for whether or not you are a bad guy. Now, there are methods available, as described today, to folks experiencing oppression at the hands of their government. They can often encrypt their electronic communications in a way that the government can't see them. But in Egypt, the Communication Act also bans the act of encryption. And further, apart from legislation, the government is successfully blocking these secure messaging apps. Signal, for example. Who here uses Signal? Anyone? Well done. I was hoping we'd get some hands from the panel. Signal is this open source chat application that hides the chats that you have. And it was recently down for a month in Egypt. Egypt took it out and no one could access it for an entire month until its parent company found ways to make it resurface. To Canada, where I'm from, Canada has this long history of colonialism, of racism, of sexism. And with respect to women's rights, the most recent issue is this month's legislation banning women from wearing the niqab, the Islamic face cover, out in public. One of the justifications spurring the ban is women's protection and their liberation, but I've yet to hear a good argument that forcing a woman to take off her clothes against her will and in public is some sort of a liberatory act for women. And this is not the first time the legislation in Canada has been used to encroach on people's freedoms in the name of women's rights. Another example is where women or girls who, when they're subjected to sex crimes, are sometimes also photographed during their assaults by their assailants, and then their pictures are circulated online. It's not just a problem limited to Canada, it's happened here in Ireland as well as elsewhere. But in Canada, in response to a public outrage, the federal government pushed through legislation that now forces our internet service providers to disclose a person's personal internet history to law enforcement without so much as a warrant. So this government can now look at a lot of different internet activities in a manner that infringes our privacy rights, suppresses social activism, enables censorship, and has literally nothing to do with protecting women. So one way to avoid disclosing private data, as INCLO member the Canadian Civil Liberties Association suggests, is to cultivate healthy online habits. I read one expert say something like, emailing is like skywriting. Do not write it down in an email unless you are okay with absolutely anyone reading it. Be discreet, be be private, have those personal conversations in privacy. And also avoid the cloud. If you need to protect your data, don't send it into the cloud. Certainly don't send it into the iCloud, where, as we all know, the iCloud has been made vulnerable and information has been retrieved from that. Moving on to India, which has proven to be a dangerous place for journalists, particularly if you've been following the news recently and in the last month. Inklo also tells the story of journalist Saket Datta, who noticed an unmarked car following him one day as he was driving home from work in Delhi. So he did what lots of us do. He called the police, who actually intercepted the car, only to discover that the men were officials with India's intelligence bureau. And so the manner in which Indian citizens, including journalists, are being watched, particularly electronically, should give us pause. As of 2014, the Indian government has direct access to India's 1 billion mobile and LAN subscribers and 108 million internet subscribers without any really effective parliamentary oversights. And further, there's no legal provision requiring that the surveilled people be notified that they're being watched. Therefore, authorities there are being given this power that's almost entirely hidden from the public eye, which impacts all citizens and not just journalists. Moving to Hungary, Inklo also describes how the Roma population suffers disproportionately at the hands of the state intent on digital oversight. For example, the Hungarian government, in the name, and it's always in the name of counterterrorism, is inspecting and recording the contents of electronic communications without the knowledge of their targets. And further, in what's touted as a crime prevention technique, CCTV cameras have been outfitted with facial recognition software. So there's a racialized and ethnocentric component to this. As the HCLU explains, searches are performed by these cameras. They're informed by criminal records which often have photographs in them. And in a country where Roma residents are disproportionately detained and arrested and photographed by the police, this means they're also being disproportionately targeted by this facial recognition technology. And so what are people supposed to do? Are we supposed to cover our faces? Is that what we should have to do in order to protect ourselves? And in some countries like Canada, you're not even allowed to do that anymore if you're a member of this marginalized cultural practice. So we must remain vigilant in calling out these civil rights abuses. And so here in Ireland, we've launched a civil rights campaign against a particularly invasive form of surveillance. Ireland is also struggling with government privacy issues in the form of the public services card. Is anyone familiar with that? Yeah? Liam, can you say in a sentence or two?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose people have seen, and it seems to be a little bit of unraveling of the state policy, but a card that was introduced as a voluntary card for interaction with one state service has been extended to a much wider range of state services, to the point of which it's essential because you needed to get a passport or driver's license, or to get social protection payments or pensions and so on. And without, I suppose, the necessary checks and balances along the way, but it's the linking into a biometric database. It has the potential for privacy issues.
Yeah, exactly. You need these cards to access services, and the cards hold a lot of your personal data. And that's not just your PPS number or your photograph or your name, but they now have these biometric facial scans, which can help facial recognition cameras identify you. So there's a problem with having such a comprehensive database. If the data is leaked, and the data is always leaked, you can't change your face as easily, obviously, as you can change a phone number or an address. And so beyond the problem of having these trackable identity markers, the cards were becoming compulsory. One woman wasn't able to get her pension for 18 months because she refused to get the card. And fortunately, she got some help from the digital privacy rights group, Digital Rights Ireland, who took on her case and solved that for her. So fortunately, organizations like Digital Rights Ireland, Frontline Defenders, the Irish Council of Civil Liberties, they're all seeking to protect our information rights. Inklo is also one such group, which has 13 independent national human rights organizations in the global south and north. And since well before the Edward Snowden links, Inklo members have been working to expose and challenge abuses of information rights via mass surveillance. And it's used several approaches to protecting digital privacy. One has been described today, and it's educating the public. What can each of us do to protect our privacy? And via Hungary, Inklo has set up this great website. If you go to www.righttohide.com, it gives you very practical, very easy advice about what each of us can do to protect ourselves, including some of the tools that were described today. It shows you how to manage your online privacy settings, your password strength, your password management. It shows you how to use your cell phone securely, how to secure your emails and your chat sessions, how to store your data, and how to hide or to better hide your internet browsing. Another option, or another advocacy technique that INCLO has been involved in is called the International Intelligence Sharing Project. What we're trying to do all the time is learn more and more about information sharing agreements between governments, how they're accessing our information, and then how they're sharing them with other governments without our knowledge. So this summer, 8 INCLO members filed Freedom of Information requests, and a 9th INCLO member, De Justicia from Colombia, will be filing their request soon. And so government responses to these requests have been particularly poor, which we anticipated. Many of our requests have been denied outright or deferred. And so various members of our INCLO continuum are now preparing appeals and are working towards litigation. The idea is not only to force accountability from our governments, but also to bring these problems back to the fore of public awareness and keep it in our mind's eye at all times. With regard to suing people and governments, we certainly do that when there's grounds. As Liam mentioned, 6 INCLO members, led by the Liberty Group of the United Kingdom, have filed an application to the European Court of Human Rights. And what they're doing is challenging aspects of the UK government's mass surveillance regime. So, the Secret Intelligence Service, the Security Service, and the Government Communications Headquarters, they can now intercept, store, and analyze vast amounts of your internet and telephone communications, regardless of any grounds for reasonable suspicion. So you're being watched very closely. It's actually really astounding what they have access to, which I'm sure my co-panelists could elaborate on, but they can seize your browser data en masse. They can store vast amount of it, and then they can sift through it for specifics, which they can hold. And they don't just take this information individually. Like the United Kingdom doesn't just look at it for the purpose of that government, it then shares it with multiple governments, and in particular, the United States. So we're contesting that, and we contend that it's incompatible with Articles 8 and 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The outcome of this case will have global implications for the right to privacy, to the right for our freedoms of expression. And the next hearing, for anyone who's interested, is coming up 7th of November. So we've seen today there's much work to be done, both locally and globally, and to ensure that our right to privacy can be developed and instilled in this digital age of electronic communications. So remembering that your communications, your emails, your phone calls, your texts, and your chats are never private is one way. Exercising absolute discretion is another. Outsmarting online surveillance using technology is definitely the third. But this larger question remains, is why are governments allowed to spy on us at all, often without even telling us? And nothing dramatized this more than when Edward Snowden released all that data. And so now the world can see how many intelligence agencies have the capacity to monitor each of us, all our communications, originating almost anywhere on Earth. From national identity cards to spying on our private conversations, our attempts to outmaneuver these tactics, this fight against mass surveillance is a tall one. And on this front, from INCLO's perspective, we are, across the global south and north, we're all in this truly together. Thank you.
Okay.